What do you really want? Who are you? What is that voice that you've been silencing over and over again? The thing that you know it's off, it's not working in your life. This could be your health, your relationship, your career. It could be lifestyle. When you start to feel unhappy or burned out, tired and numb all the time, something's off and you're pushing it down. So time to tell the truth. The biggest thing that is so impactful about the irreversible step is freedom. Freeing yourself from the constant doubt, the overanalyzing, the shoving it away and saying, I don't deserve that, I can't have that. And you're actually stepping forward into who you really want to be. And there's liberation in that.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wisdom from the Helm, where we go beyond the typical highlight reels of real estate's most trusted women to reveal the secrets of their success, not just in business, but also in life. We're your hosts, Danielle, Wilkie, and Heather Frick. And today we are thrilled to welcome Amy Lessinger. Amy has led at every level in real estate over her almost 30-year career. And she rose from a RE/MAX agent in Reno to a broker owner of a thriving 130 agent firm, and then eventually joined headquarters at RE/MAX, and then eventually became president of RE/MAX. So she went everywhere. And at RE/MAX, she was leading more than 140,000 agents worldwide. And earlier this year in 2025, she left her post at RE/MAX and stepped fully into a new chapter where she is guiding high performers as a transformational speaker and strategist with her Irreversible Step philosophy. So today, she's helping individuals and leaders embrace these game-changing transitions with courage and clarity. And today, we're going to talk about powerful stories about reinvention, leading with heart in volatile markets, and why the decisions you don't make may matter the most. So, welcome, Amy.
Hello, Danielle. It's so great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, Heather and I are so thrilled you're
And
here.
hi,
And
Heather, as well.
hi,
My
we
screen is
can't
just a little.
wait. So, you started as an agent, and I'm going to say the year, don't cringe too much.
Gonna
I,
age me.
s- yeah, you started as an agent in 96. Am I right?
25, yeah.
Oh my gosh. And then you later, obviously, we talked about owned a large brokerage in Reno. And then, ultimately left to go join RE/MAX corporate.
Mhm.
What drove you to ultimately exit that business and make that leap to brokerage leadership? Because I think a lot of team leaders who grow over time think about this. And I would love for them to hear more about your experience and why you made that choice.
It's interesting, and this is part of what has driven me to create the work that I've created in the Irreversible Step. When I built the brokerage, we were in the absolute throes of the Great Recession. Everything was collapsing around us. And, we had a 10,000 square foot building that was costing us a pretty penny. And, every single day, an agent would come in and say, I don't know how I'm going to make this work. I don't have any business. And, then their clients were losing their homes. Everything was collapsing. And I made the decision right then and there. I said, look, if I can figure out how to help people produce, no matter what is going on in the marketplace, then they will win and we will win. And that's exactly what I did. I just became obsessed with human performance, the psychology behind performance, and what actually drives someone to elevate and escalate their ability to produce results no matter what's going on around them. And so I just poured myself into my agents. And every single day, it was like if it did not help them be more productive, more professional, and ultimately produce more, then we didn't do anything with it. So we built that brokerage to sell just under $1 billion, over the Great Recession, which is an enormous accomplishment. And we led the nation in per agent productivity. I can't remember. We were something like number 40, 42 in the nation across all brands. But here's what happened to me, Danielle and Heather, and I know that you understand this. I started to become unfulfilled in that work. I felt like I had, mastered it. I loved what I was doing in building people because that is who I am at my core. I have always been a people builder. But I started to suffer from burnout. The business was thriving, it was productive. But here's the problem, I didn't know who I was without it,
Mm.
and I think that that's something that leaders struggle with, founders struggle with. And I did not know what I was going to do next. But I know that I needed to make a change. That's
Mm.
for sure. I probably held on to the brokerage a little too long.
Mm.
And I think that that cost me in lots of different areas, but all things in their time. That was a growth zone for me, right?
Mhm.
So I held on a little bit too long, but then I ultimately decided, okay, it's time. And so I elected to sell the brokerage and I didn't know what was next. So right there,
Mm.
I took an irreversible step. And for
Wow.
our audience, what's an irreversible step? It's that moment that you step forward. Every single breakthrough that you've ever had in your life is that moment that you made a choice. You made a choice and you took action. And it's such an action that you don't want to take it back. And so it becomes irreversible because you step into that new identity. And I think I'm living proof that you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to have the exact 5-year plan that comes after it. You just have to tell the truth about what you really want and where your purpose is and open to what's next. And it's interesting because I didn't see it coming, but the pathway to working at Remax headquarters opened because I took my irreversible step and said, I don't know what's next, but I'm open. I want a bigger platform. I want to impact more brokers and more agents. And the door opened up. And so, I think that that's a huge pivotal moment to why I want to do the work that I'm doing now is because I see so many people who are just stuck. They're so stuck. The more that we rise, the more success we have, the more our identity gets tangled up in what we do instead of who we are. We don't see the pathway to what's next, and that's really scary. We mire ourselves in, obligation, loyalty, all those things matter. But at the end of the day, are you happy?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting. That is like first of all, such a great lesson about you just can't always know the next thing,
Right.
but you can't realize the next thing unless you let go of the last thing.
Sure.
And so that's a hard place to be. And I
It is.
wonder, I this kind of probably apply to even your most recent big
Yes.
irreversible step. So you left
Yes.
Remix earlier this year.
I did.
What prompted you to step away? And then how did that decision change shape your next chapter?
I think because I've had the life experience that I've had, and I have led through every kind of storm. I led at Remax through so much industry disruption. And, I got that, nudge again of, what? It's time to explore something new. It's time to explore something exciting. And so I did. This was a very hard decision for me, but it was the right decision. And so I made the decision to step away and took another irreversible step. And I think that's, what I want people to understand is you can change your life, that there is life after, and that you can create the kind of life that fuels you with purpose and soul. And that's what I wanted to do next.
Mhm. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Amy, tell us a little bit more about the philosophy, right? About the
Sure.
irreversible step and kind of what you've created. And I'm actually particularly interested in the word irreversible. Like help me, tell us a little bit more about
Sure.
that. That feels like really deliberately chosen as you probably
Yes.
branded that. Really curious about that.
Sure. Well, it's the framework that I think I wish I would have had all those years ago. It's the framework that helps people get from where they are now to where they want to go without chaos and, crumbling and having everything fall apart.
Mm.
So there's 5 simple steps. The first one starts with tell the truth. What do you really want?
Mhm.
Who are you? What is that voice that you've been silencing over and over and over again? The thing that it's off, it's not working in your life. And it can span again, lots of different categories. This could be your health, it could be a relationship, it could be your career, it could be lifestyle. There's all kinds of crossroads that we find ourselves at. over the course of our life. And so, when you start to have that nagging feeling, or you start to feel unhappy or burned out or just tired and exhausted and numb all the time, something's off and you're pushing it down. And so, time to tell the truth. So, that's step one. Step two is explore what's possible. What I think happens so often is we tend to think either or. I can either have my thriving, successful C suite job, or I could open that restaurant that I've always wanted to do. But here's what happens to people: they perceive that the life they want going forward is perhaps a downgrade to the life they have now. Well, what if it wasn't? What's actually possible to help you bridge that gap? And so we want to expand thinking. We want to expand what is entirely possible, and then acknowledge that fear, because fear is there to keep us safe. We're hardwired to, be a little bit suspect of some of our grand ideas. But at the same time, fear can be a jailer. And I think the biggest thing is you don't want to let it lead. Go ahead and acknowledge it and listen to it. But is that really true? What else is possible? If you were to do the thing that you would want to do, no matter what, no matter who's looking, no matter what consequences, how could it be the most successful thing you've ever done? So then from there, it's pick your path. So, you're at a choice point, but you haven't made it permanent yet. So, are you going to explore the idea of, yeah, I really do think that I want to open that business that I've really been wanting to do? Or I really am going to totally change my career? Or, yes, I'm going to focus on my health and my mental health and my well being, depending on what category you're in. So, once you pick your path, then you build your bridge. So, now it's how do I get from here to there? And this is not some 5-year plan that you're never going to do with 1,000 steps. There's a framework that I've developed to make what is complex easy, where you map it all out, you lay it all out, you look at your resources, because that's another thing is people think that they're starting from ground zero. You're not. You get to take everything that you have done for your entire career and your entire life with you. All of that experience comes with you. So you're not starting from scratch. So we kind of take an inventory of, what do we have now? What do we need? What are our real big roadblocks? And what's our plan there? And from there, you make an irreversible step. You take an irreversible step that means I'm moving forward down this path and I'm declaring that this is what's next for me. What does that mean? Maybe it means you go ahead and sign the contract that you haven't been wanting to sign. Maybe it is that you have that difficult conversation that you've needed to have for a long time. Maybe you publicly say, you know what? I am going to open up that restaurant that I've always wanted to open up. Or no, I'm going to declare that my health is going to be my number one priority, and I'm going to set the boundaries, the permanent boundaries around it that I need in order for my health to take that turn. So the irreversible word is really what it means to break through to the other side. It's making that change in you and literally embodying it. And if you look back on all of your breakthroughs that you've had, because we have many and we take many irreversible steps throughout the course of our life, it always comes with you making a decision of, this is who I am now.
Yeah. I love that explanation. And I think like different personalities will have different reactions to that word, right? Because some of us have that idea of, oh, well, I can always go back, right? Or I can always jump back into the thing I was doing. And what I hear you saying is, well, that might maybe feel like a safety net. It's actually probably keeps you stuck, right? Having that kind of thinking.
I am not against safety nets. Actually, there's sort of build your bridge portion of it, because we won't move if we're paralyzed by fear. This isn't about leaping and not knowing that the water's going to catch you or a net's going to catch you, but what it's not about is playing safe and just saying, you know what, yeah, I'm going to stay over here because it's the safe thing even though you're miserable. I think that's the difference is, so I'm not against the safety net at all.
Mm.
Um foundationally, the irreversible step is about embodying the new you and taking the step that makes it permanent. And I'm never going back. I don't know about you, but I am certainly not the same person that I was, in my 20s, 30s, 40s. We take so many of these steps, but, we just, I think now, given this framework, and when you start to understand it, you say, oh, right, that is how we transform.
Yeah. Um, I'd love to ask a question. I'm gonna back up to the 5 steps because I really appreciate you breaking that down, for us and for the people listening. The first one, tell the truth. So, question for you, that seems so easy, and as I'm listening to you, I'm like, "Well, what is the truth?" Right? I mean, how do you help guide people through that? And maybe even to help us understand how you guided yourself through that first step. That would be great.
Part of the program is that we do what's called a truth audit. And that is rooted in who am I and what do I actually want? And so, once you start to ask those kinds of questions, that is literally rooted in values and purpose. I truly believe that when we get off course and off track, and when we feel like something is off, that very often that is stemmed in, something's off within our values. We're violating our values somewhere. But, working with high achievers and organizations, nobody wants another speech about values. And so, I mean, honestly, it's like, oh God, are we going to do this again? Mission, vision, values, and beliefs? No, it's really a truth audit to distill down and get to that much quicker, so that you can actually say out loud what you really want. I want to change this relationship. I want to change how I feel about my work. I want to change the meaning that I place behind being healthy and fit. It's those things. That's the truth, but it also is tied and rooted in the foundation of values and purpose.
Mm. And then for you, what was out of line for you in that from values perspective, if you wouldn't mind sharing kind of your personal experience with understanding that and your own truth?
Over the course of my career, I, like so many successful people, have suffered from burnout. And burnout, I believe, is a function of your boundaries are being crossed, kind of everywhere. And often you feel powerless to change them, which is another lie we tell ourselves. We always have the power to do it. The doing of it, though, is the difficulty. Boundaries, and I think burnout, without a doubt, it stems from the fact that your values are being violated. And I am not immune to that. The other thing that for me personally is purpose. I am a builder of people by nature. That is something that is deeply, deeply important to me. I truly have helped countless people achieve at levels they never thought possible. And so anytime that I've gravitated kind of away from that, I've always felt the pull to go back to it for sure.
Amy, I want to go to the second one. So that was tell the truth, which, like Heather's point, it's actually really hard.
It is hard.
It's hard because we are programmed to start to ignore our truth a little bit. We're put in environments where to survive and to succeed, sometimes you have to sort of mute like your real truth. And so that can be tricky. So, I think this truth audit and really spending time there, it makes a ton of sense to me. Tell us a little bit about step two, which is exploring what's possible. Um, I thought, you made some comments around, oftentimes when we're making choices, it's black or white. It's like yes or no, black or white. There's two options, either stay or I go. And you mentioned in your work how you can help explore more possibility. Tell us more about how you do that with people.
That's a series of questions, where we go through and we talk about, you know, what's actually possible in the scenario that you're thinking of. So I'll give you an example. I worked with a wonderful person by the name of Dominic, and Dominic had imposter syndrome. He was in the luxury event planning space.
Mm.
He took an underperforming group and area and built it to the third largest in the nation where it was producing huge amounts. So he had an opportunity to go to Napa, which is, one of the biggest luxury event,
Mhm.
locations out there. And it was a huge leap, a huge step for him. And he just said, I'm not sure. I feel like, I need to evolve as a leader in order to do this. So in the Explore What's Possible, we started with, well, I can either wait for a general manager position to open up in with the group that I'm at, or I can relocate my family, which is a huge irreversible step, right? I can relocate my family and, make this huge leap. Well, it turns out as we walk through this and as we navigated that both were possible. And so he had a conversation with his boss. He was able to secure a promotion, and he's now working with both teams. So that's just an example of how we started coming at it with, okay, we got choice one or choice two. And once we worked through the framework, that third choice revealed itself and it became actually the pathway.
Yeah, I love that. I think I struggle with this all the time, because I do think that this duality, this like right, wrong, yes, no, black, white, just is so pervasive in the way that we live our lives every day because we need to move quickly, we have to make decisions fast. But when you're talking about something of this magnitude, some kind of irreversible step, really trying to get to, what Heather and I talk a lot about, which is sort of that win-win. Where can you live in a world of and that was such a great example. Like, you actually could do a little of this and you could do a little of this. It's
And
not
both and
yeah.
yes,
Yeah, which sounds like
completely.
that's really present in what you're
Mhm.
working
For
with.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah,
It
that makes
has to
sense.
be, otherwise the doors close before it even opens.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's so important is literally I look at this as laying out a bunch of puzzle pieces. Do we have all of them? Do we have all the corners? Do we have all the edges? Do we have the middle part? Okay, now how does the picture fit together? And you
Mm,
can't do that if you say, well, there's only five puzzle pieces to be had. Is that
mm.
true?
So step 2, exploring what's possible, you're really kind of moving into an abundance mindset, right? Like, there's so much possibility, you're expanding that. Step
And a dream
3.
state.
Oh, okay, great, and a
And a
dream
dream
state.
state.
Oh, I
What do
love
I
that.
actually really want? If I could just
Mm.
dream a little bit, because I swear as we age and as we, gain success and titles and accolades and we're constantly praised for external validators, boy, our dream wiring gets faulty. That's for sure.
Before I move on to 3, I actually wanna ask you something about that dream state. Um, I love that addition to the because I think like Danielle said, so many of us, we're programmed to believe that what's possible is what we see, right? Like, just what's in front of us or maybe what we've already done. And, it's actually really hard, I think, to imagine to actually put yourself into that, like, visioning or kind of really expansive imagination kind of, mindset. How do you kind of help people push to that or really kind of get unstuck around that and get into that dream state, if you will?
Well, it's a total framework. Again, there's frameworks within the framework because you've got to build each step and funnel it down and make it simple for people. But it is again rooted in those questions. When it came to working with Dominic, for example, we came at that starting to think that, well, we've got, only two choices. Well, there's also a decision-making framework that I use. And that is, okay, choice one is stay where I am, wait for a general manager position to open up. All right, what feels great about that decision? What makes you feel good about the decision? All right, what's off on that decision? Where would you have regrets on that decision? And if you look back 5 years from now, are you happy you made that choice? And then we looked at, all right, make the leap, move the family. What feels good about that? What's not feeling great about that? And then 5 years from now, what do you regret about that decision? And then the third one came up and it was like, and so once you map it all out, it's like it becomes glaringly obvious to you what the choice is. So we use lots of filters and frameworks to help people. One thing that my own coach has said to me, she said, Amy, you have this uncanny ability to turn complex situations into something very simple and usable for people. And so I have worked really hard within this framework to make what seems overwhelming. I don't know about you, but when I get too overwhelmed, I just shut down and it's like, I just kind of say, okay, well, I'll deal with that later because it's too much for your brain. So this is a delicate balance of dealing with something that can be really overwhelming because big change in our life can be really overwhelming. Um, so you don't want to overwhelm people with too many steps, too many questions, too much stuff, because then it gets to be way too complicated. So you root them in the framework and just keep things really, really simple, but moving down the funnel.
Great. I'm gonna move us to 3, which was pick your path. Um, Speaking of overwhelming, that may feel overwhelming to some. How do you help people kind of, they've got a bunch of options now, they're feeling abundant, you've helped them expand their thinking about what's possible and their choices. How do you actually move someone forward towards that next picking of the path?
We work in categories. So I mentioned them earlier. Things like, am I looking at career? Am I looking at, soul, spirituality stuff? Like I'm not finding purpose in my work. Health, lifestyle. We work within those categories and it's like, all right, what path feels most aligned for you? Where people get stuck is they go into all the details. It's like, okay, well, how would I do this? Do I have to go back to school? Do I have to, like all the things. The only thing about pick your path is what direction do you want to sort of explore more? Where do you think you want to if you're standing at a fork in a road and you've got option one, option two, option three, you know, which one feels the most aligned right now? Because what we're probably not going to do is fix the relationship that needs fixing, plus change the career, plus, all those things. One thing at a time. And let's do the one that is the most impactful and the one that feels like the most true right now. So that's how we avoid that is just all it is literally is what direction are we going? Not how, not how are we going to do all of this? It's just, okay, if I really followed my heart and followed what I know to be true, what path would I take a step down? And that's all that pick your path means. It's very, very simple.
Okay, so now we're on 4. We're building our bridge. How do you like if I'm working with you, Amy, like talk to me about how I build my bridge.
Sure. Same thing, more framework. But at the end of the day, we do a resource audit. I mentioned it earlier. And we look at what are you starting with? What do you already have? Because so often we just get so stuck in the, oh my God, this is so big. I can't even handle it. Yet we forget everything that we have that we get to take with us. So the resource audit is really, really important. So we talk about support. What kind of support do you have? What kind of support do you need? What about your finances? Money's a big deal for people. So, how are your finances? If you decide that you want to do something else, are your finances equipped to support you? And if they're not, we don't get stuck there and we don't say, oh, well, now I can't do it. We now build a plan around that. So we have to isolate and figure out where are your gaps. So it's really a gap audit at the end of the day. We figure out where your gaps are and then we make the plan for just those things. And it's really, really, again, a simple process because what I know for sure is that when you get really clear on who you are, what you want, what direction you're going to go, all the rearranging starts to happen and there starts to become ease. Have you ever felt that before?
Mm. Mhm.
It just is a natural thing that our brains do because we've asked our brains better questions. It starts to give us better answers. And when we start to look at the gaps in our resources, our brains in the back are just kind of saying, how can I solve that? How could I get what I need without having to spend the money that I maybe don't have right now? You have to start asking yourself better questions in order to produce better answers. And so by focusing really on the gaps and what we don't have, instead of all the steps to get us there, it's like, okay, we know finances are a gap. All right, let's go to work on that problem. Let's solve that. And then we can go to work on the next thing. That eliminates the sheer overwhelm that happens when you're trying to navigate something like this.
Yep. Okay. So we have built our bridge
Mhm.
and now we're taking our irreversible step. Tell us more about that. Like, what does that feel like? And what kind of scaffolding do you help people put in place to actually make it happen?
The biggest thing that I think is so impactful about the irreversible step is its freedom. You're freeing yourself from the constant doubt, the overanalyzing, the pushing it down, the shoving it away and saying, I don't deserve that. I can't have that. That's impossible. And you're actually stepping forward into who you really want to be. And there's liberation in that. And I think that that's why the irreversible step is so important and why taking it is so important because you actually start to embody who you are going to become next. You're not there yet. And we've all taken those steps where it's like, okay, I'm not 100% there yet. Just like Dominic. Dominic isn't, the general manager in Napa, for example. Not yet, but he took his irreversible step and he's on that path. He purposefully chose the direction that he wants to go. And we discovered that he can have a both and in order to get it. And his irreversible step was declaring it to his boss, standing in his power, and asking for the promotion that he deserved and that he wanted. And he got it. So, an irreversible step doesn't have to be chaotic, it doesn't have to be dramatic. It is the act of embodiment. And so, for some people, might be, yeah, you send the resignation letter, you sign the contract, you publicly say that you sold the company, you have that difficult conversation that maybe you need to have. And that could be a family member, it could be your partner, it could be a business partner, any of those things, those are irreversible steps because you've changed. You want something else and you're moving toward it.
Hmm. I have one more question really fast on this. I'm listening to this. Let's listen. Our listeners are listening to this and they're thinking, okay, Amy, I get it. How do I know that I'm standing at the edge of my own irreversible step? Like, how do I know that I'm even at the precipice of this whole thing?
You know when something is off. We sort of talked about it in the very beginning where you're numb, you're burned out, you're thinking about this decision over and over. It's the gosh, I really wish I had more time to do this. I really wish that I could be bold and change this. It's the stuff that it's I call it a whisper,
Mm,
and it's that stuff that's in the back of your mind that literally is whispering at you that we're so good at shoving down.
mm,
And that's why the first step is telling the truth because if you've gotten all the way to an irreversible step, you already know. You already know that you're standing at a crossroad. You already know that you need to do something about this. It's just that I think that the more successful we become, the more that we achieve and acquire things and acquire status and acquire titles and roles and obligations and loyalties, the more we quiet that voice down.
mhm,
And building on that idea a little bit, intuition, that word intuition kind of comes to mind of just being able to recognize that along the way, let's say you're coaching somebody, you're working with someone, and you've said a couple times you're working with high achievers, right? High performers who likely have a lot of ambition,
Yes.
right? And so we're so used to, as high achievers and high performers, just like setting goals and, you know, putting a lot of stuff out there. How do you help people kind of balance that ambition with also tapping into intuition or the other intelligence centers that we have in our body, from our gut to our heart, along the way, right? As they're facing this transition. How does that come into play?
There's a quote that I love that I have really actually tried to embody and live by myself. And that is, you know, Your goal is to build a life that you don't need a vacation from. I love that quote because ambition, when it is fueling you in purpose and fueling you in, what you desire most and building your dreams, there's nothing like it. It doesn't feel like work. So I love ambition. I'm an incredibly ambitious person. However, what happens to lots of high achievers is the dream that we built no longer feels like what's next. And that's totally normal. I mean, it's just normal. And I think that we really, really drive people to seek accolades external from themselves. It's what do you do? What do you have? What have you achieved? Instead of who are you? What's your purpose? And what are your gifts that you want to give to the world? Those are two really, really different things. And ambition in either lane can be really fulfilling or actually feel a little unfulfilling. And again, it goes back to all those things we've talked about. Something's off. If there's that feeling of unfulfillment, boredom, burnout, numbness, all those things that we experience.
I like that you just applied this and both concept versus or, right? It's not ambition or intuition is what I'm hearing. It's both and sort of pointing that ambition or feeling that in the right the motivation is what's important.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Um I'm going to turn it a little bit back on you and your story if that's okay. And I'm curious as you have gone through this journey with creating this system, I imagine that your definition of success has evolved quite a bit. Help us maybe understand, like, how do you think about success now through the lens of the irreversible step and then in this next chapter of yourself?
That's an easy one. For me, this next chapter, everything that I do needs to be a hell yes. A hell yes. And so, when someone approaches me with an opportunity, if that internal barometer says hell yes, then I'm moving forward. If it's it doesn't really float my boat, I could do it. I have the skill set. Um, it's a no. It's a no. And that's enough. And that's okay. And I think that, there's too many times over the span of everything that I've done in my life that I've done things exactly as I should have done them, meaning it's what was expected, it's what was, my obligation. And those things matter, but this version of me has the best work of her life ahead of her. And I want to give it to the world. That is my next chapter. And that is the definition of success for me.
That's awesome. And then for someone listening who maybe, I think probably a lot of the people listening might feel like they're on the edge of a leap, of an irreversible step, um, but they're scared, right? Because that's a really natural part of what you said was keeping us safe. It's a part of the journey. What would you say to them right now?
Well, I love to trot fear right out into the arena and take a look at it and get really curious and kind of playful with fear. Because at the end of the day, your brain is hardwired to bring those things forward. And so the only way that you can quiet fear is to allow it to be said and allow it to come out and just look at it and go, okay, what if that happens? Then what? Okay, then what if that happens? All right, then what after that? Okay, then what if even that happens? Okay, then now how would we handle that? That's the only way that you can actually move forward. It's this is not a white knuckle experience. We do that too much and we do it for the wrong reason. This is literally an exploration of what's going on in your mind and what it's there to keep you safe from. So, for example, if maybe, it's like, I don't have the money to do that. What That's a safety mechanism. We should thank that voice, right? Instead of going, well, who cares? We're going to do it anyway. Well, wait a minute. Is that right? How else could we do it? What would it look like if it looked ideal? Okay, that's great. How possible is ideal? Okay, not quite possible now, but what is possible? So you see how you just have to kind of play with it and look at it and allow it to come forward so that you can actually say, "Oh, thank you. You're trying to keep me safe. I understand. Okay. Well, now that we've checked that box, I know I'm safe over here. So let's get on with the business and moving forward."
I love that. Giving it a voice and actually just getting clear about it.
Amy, what's a failure you're oddly proud of? And what did it teach you about growth or leadership?
Oh, we're going to touch on all the things today. The failure of my marriage.
Mm.
Yeah, the failure of my marriage. Honestly, I told you earlier that I kept the brokerage for too long. My ex-husband, Brian, who is one of my dear friends to this day, we had a very amicable divorce. We chose that. Um, he would tell you that, he asked me to, part with it for a long time because I think he could see that I wasn't happy. But I was too stuck in the identity of it, and I didn't know who I was without it, and I didn't know what I was gonna do without it, and so I think it took a toll on our relationship, but I am most proud of the way we handled and we walked through that situation. Just because you decide to change the nature of your relationship with someone doesn't mean that you have to burn it all down and destroy the relationship that you once had. And I think that is
Mm.
something that, we need to take a hard look at societally. We're taught that if we're not in a relationship with somebody anymore, that we have to dislike that person.
Mm.
Um, and that's wrong in so many cases. What if you chose to walk through an adjustment of your relationship and you did it in a graceful way? And don't get me wrong, it was painful, it was hard. But our divorce lawyer said, you two should write a book. And I'm proud of that. I really am proud of that. We chose it for ourselves. It was a 25-year marriage. We built our businesses together. We had two beautiful children. And, those relationships matter deeply. And so I think that, that's something I'm really proud of that I think by all means was a failure.
Mm. When you think about what you learned from that, I'd be curious how you applied that to business because I do think life and business, they just weave in and out with each other, you know? They don't belong in separate boxes. So, from that failure, what did you learn and how did that maybe even change the way you think about work or your career?
Yeah, I think, it's exactly what I said earlier about the fact that, when you need to redefine the nature of a relationship, you don't have to destroy it. Now, make no mistake, there's been times in my life and everybody's life where you're like, that relationship has run its course and it is no longer and it is no more. And so there is no going back, which, I want to make space for that because that's reality sometimes. But I'm not gonna spend one moment hating over it because that just robs you of your joy. And so I think in business, without a doubt, I have always been a kind and compassionate leader. I have always been a builder of people, but I have always been very strong with my boundaries and strong with my integrity. And so it's one of those things that I believe you can be that kind of leader. You may not be able to be in every environment and be that kind of leader. But I believe that there is space in the business world to bring kindness, compassion, also accountability, also expectations. You can have all of those things. It's the both and. You don't have to have either or.
Mhm.
And you can develop, deep relationships with people in pursuit of their growth. And I think that was one of the things that I loved the most about my time
Mhm.
at Remax headquarters. And that side of my career is, the people I had the opportunity to work with on my team were just incredible. And I loved working with them. They were incredible people.
Mm. That's awesome. All right. We're going to wrap with one final question, and then we'll make sure that everyone listening knows where they can find you and hear more about what you're up to. But knowing what you do now, what would you tell your 25-year-old self?
I would tell my 25-year-old self to stop worrying so much about meeting the external expectation. That when you live in purpose and integrity, that all of those other things, they take care of themselves. Doesn't mean that it's always easy. Doesn't mean you won't have difficulty or challenges down the road. But when you're really clear on who you are and what you want, and what your purpose is in the world, everything just falls into place. It just does. And I think that's what I would tell her. Because I think I pursued growth and we talked about ambition earlier. I was incredibly ambitious and I was probably a little too gritty. Didn't probably have to come at things in that in that vein. And you're smiling because I think you recognize that in yourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what I would tell her.
Mm, I love that. Well, you're doing amazing work
Thank
with
you.
the Irreversible Step, and I know that so many people will benefit from this work and what you're putting in the world. So, how can people find you and learn more about what you're doing?
Well, I can't thank you both enough. This has been such an awesome conversation. People can find me on amylessinger.com. I am on, all the social channels, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. So I've got my website, amylessinger.com. It's got all kinds of details and I got tools and things that are getting ready to hit. We're going to do a 6-week transformation experience for people who are finding themselves in this moment. We're going to walk them through all the things I just told you about today.
Cool. That's exciting. We're so thrilled that you spent some time with us today and that you made that time. I think that there are so many people who could benefit from this work and it was really fun chatting more about it and learning more about what you're up to.
Well, I told you earlier that if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And this was overwhelmingly a hell yes, because I love the
Yeah.
work that both of
Love
you
it.
do and everything that you're doing to empower women in leadership and real estate. It matters and it's incredible. So thank you both.
Cool. Thanks, Amy. We appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Amy.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this conversation valuable, subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform, and please consider giving us a rating or leaving us a review as it helps others find us. You can find all past episodes or learn more at the-helm.com.